can. So 2025 is going to be a big year for AI, and the UK government is going all in. I think it's important to say that all of these initiatives are starting to coalesce and circle around one another. Different parts of the jigsaw puzzle start to land. So what does it all mean for the FIDA, and where are we going next? There was some rumblings going on behind the scenes in terms of whether the FIDA would indeed enter Trilogue. Now that's the expectation. I think it was felt that it could enter quite early and start moving along and be agreed before the summer. But there seems to be some doubt about that. And what do you think, Nicola? What are you hearing?
Well, the what's happening is obviously that we now have a new EU presidency. It's sort of switched from Hungary to Poland, and that switch has meant that the trilogue didn't start in January as we would have expected. And that's been used again by some industry lobby groups, predominantly insurance and predominantly from France, to start lobbying against the principle of FIDA. And whilst we think FIDA is way too far gone in the process and also in people's minds to be stopped, we now need to see how quickly Poland picks up the trilogue. And if they may have other priorities than the Hungarians to really push this along. But the general industry consensus, and that's also everything that I'm hearing from associations who are close to Brussels, is that we're still going to see FIDA going through trilogue and then becoming law either before the summer break or just after. So we're still hoping for July this year.
Okay, great. I think from a UK perspective, of course, we're not party to those discussions. But as I mentioned in the introduction, the Data Use and Access Bill, as it's now called, it's been renamed from the Smart Data Bill, is running in parallel. Now, there are a couple of things in it in terms of trust ID and verification and trust marks, which I thought obviously was interesting and perhaps a bit of a departure from where the EU FIDA is going. Marie, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, well, personally, it's a great step forward, or will be when we see it. It was, very much like Nicola was saying about FIDA and the EU presidency delaying things. We had the same thing in the UK with the government elections last year. It feels like it's ages ago, but it's only last year. And of course, that meant that the original bill, the Digital Information Bill, was paused. But they very, very quickly, and everybody was expecting this to happen, came up with something very, very similar, the Data Use and Access Bill. What's really interesting is the sheer number of government departments now looking at smart data and starting consultations for it. So we haven't got the bill yet, but the work is very much already underway. And in conversations recently with the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero and the regulator Ofgem for the energy sector, they're already talking about the need for secondary legislation beyond the Data Use and Access Bill in order to create a smart data scheme for the energy sector. So they're starting to look at what the roadblocks, so not roadblocks, the key signposts are in terms of sort of moving us continually down the road. So it's really, really very encouraging. I was told very recently that the commitment seems to be for 5 consent-driven data sharing schemes by 2030 in the UK. So we would expect property to be within that. There's a lot of work going on with the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Energy, as I've just mentioned, there are several consultations going on in terms of consumer consent to move data, smart data energy schemes for meeting net zero, etc., etc. Some have been or are going to be slightly more problematic. There was a consultation recently with the telecoms sector for open communications. My understanding is that they had very limited participation from the actual telecoms companies themselves. So there's clearly an education piece, and that this is more than just a compliance exercise, and it's an opportunity. So I think the work that's going on in Europe with FIDA hopefully should pull the UK sectors along with it, and vice versa.